Well, I'll make a start by letting you know who we are and who we have on the session today. So my name's Kate Harrison. I'm one of the employee engagement specialists here at Terryberry. We also have our UK Managing Director, Ian Fever, joining us, and also Neil Shawnee, who will be leading the session today. So
Lovely.
after okay, so it's my welcome, first of all, to our second session in our webinar series. And the aim of these sessions is to share knowledge about current business challenges to do with human capital. So the session should last a maximum of 45 minutes with an optional Q&A at the end if you wish to stay for that. And it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Neil Shawnee of Navanter. So I've known Neil a while. He's a really versatile trainer who works with organisations internationally, focusing on sales and leadership, but not exclusively those topics. He's got a really special way, I feel, of making things super simple and breaking it down into practical steps, which basically means any client he has worked for has always seen a very measurable difference following his involvement. Ahead of this session, we talked about the concept of company identity and culture and how organisations tend to struggle getting this right, particularly aligning their identity with their culture. So we thought it would be a great session topic today to try and demystify this topic for our March session. So I'll hand over to Neil now, and I hope you enjoy.
Lovely, thank you, Kate, and hello everybody. So as Kate said, my name is Neil Shawnee. I run an organisation called Navanter. We'll do some introductions as we get into it, but let's begin with learning objectives for today. By the end of this webinar, you will understand the difference between identity and culture and how they're linked. We'll look at 4 different types of organisational culture, and I'll ask you to do a bit of interaction while we're going through to find some clues to your own organisation's culture based on what we're talking about. I will share with you the 9 things which employees need and want in their role, and you will recognise the actions to maximise your organisation's culture within the identity that you have. So, as Kate said, as I said, my name is Neil Shawnee. I'm director at Navanter. We do just one thing really, which is what I call sales PM fusion, but that's quite a broad topic. But my background, I have 23 years experience working in project management, 25 years experience working in sales, 14 years experience working in training. I studied for 22 years, so I reckon that makes me 84. Some of those overlapped. But what I specialize in is bringing those different parts of an organization together, the sales side and the delivery side, through things like organizational culture, identity, and so on, to help organizations to sell more and to drive customer satisfaction. So that's me. I am going to hand over to Ian Fever, UK Managing Director of Terryberry, to give his own introduction to this topic. Ian.
Thank you, Neil. If you could just put my first slide up there, please.
It's coming. It's coming. There you go.
There we go. Yes, so my name's Ian Fever. I am the Managing Director for Terryberry in the UK. Absolute pleasure to join you here today. And I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about a success culture and what that might look like in terms of, how do we create a success culture? And I have an analogy, if you like, to share with you that proves that recognition really does make a difference to how people feel energized when they go to work. So if we look at the arena of football, when football teams play each other, normally the home team will win. In fact, you don't have to be a football expert to know that the home team normally wins. So when I say the home team, the team that's playing in their own stadium normally wins the matches. Why is that? Because the pitch is the same size. It's the same object they're playing with. The goals are the same size. You have a referee. So why does the home team normally win? Well, players and management will tell you it's because of the supporters that they have behind them. In a stadium of 50,000 people, 48,000 of that stadium will be the home support. If it's a Liverpool team at home, 48,000 Liverpool supporters and just 2,000 for the away team. And what happens during that game is that the home support will cheer everything good that their players do. If a player wins a tackle, the support will cheer and encourage that. They're recognizing that. And what happens then, the next player will want to win a tackle because that player wants that encouragement and that positive reinforcement. So when players score a goal, it's cheered to the rooftops. And what happens is, as the match goes on, the home team players become more and more energized because they're feeding off of the encouragement they're receiving. Whereas the away teams start to deflate. And this is why, more often than not, the home team wins. So something very strange happened just a couple of years ago. We went into COVID, didn't we? And during the season of 2020-2021, during that football season, for the first time ever, all football matches in the entire season were played behind closed doors, just like this one here. That's the Manchester City ground. There's not a fan in that stadium. So what happened? Well, for the first time ever in the history of top flight football, the away team won more often than the home team. And for me, that demonstrated the proof that that positive encouragement, positive reinforcement, recognition, the difference it makes to performance is incredible. You know, so the question that I pose to businesses now is, what are you doing to encourage your people every day? What are you doing to be their home supporters? How do you do that if they're hybrid workers? So that whole energizing of people is what builds culture. When you have your company values, those values are important. I see the tackles and the shots and the saves as being the behaviors that lead to results. In your business, it might be teamwork, it might be innovation that leads, collaboration. Those values might lead to a successful organization. And when you recognize people for living those values, they live them more frequently and with more passion. And that's how you build a success culture. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Ian. So let's have a little bit of work defining what organizational culture and organizational identity mean. So I'm going to invite you to pop some ideas in the chat for me. What do we mean by organizational culture and identity? Give me some thoughts. Or you can take yourself off mute and you can talk to us too, whatever works for you. Give me some thoughts. What is organizational culture and identity? Okay, so Kate, how a company wants to be seen. Nice. I like that from identity. Julia, the people who work there and their values. Nice. I'm going to stick that one under culture. We'll separate the two in a second. Any other thoughts? I'm imagining in my head people frantically typing away here, but I have no idea. Okay, if some more come through. Oh, there you go. Stuart, the collection of values, expectations, and practices. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to, if you have more ideas, pop them in. I will pick them up as we go through. I'll keep the chat open. I'm going to separate out these two things though, and have a look at the difference and the similarities between organizational identity and organizational culture. So let's look at identity first on the left-hand side. Organizational identity is all about who the organization is, what the organization sees itself as, what the organization stands for, what the organization's higher purpose is for which it exists. What do we as an organization do? Not so much in terms of the products and the services delivered, but why are we here? What makes us different to other people? Why do we deserve a place in our market? The organization's identity should be 100% aligned to marketing literature. Why? Because people buy into organizations they can relate to. And if you don't clearly communicate your identity, you are missing a key engagement opportunity with both customers and employees. Now, how well are your organizations communicating their identities? Pop a couple of things in the chat to me to tell me a little bit about, share a word or two about what the identity of your organizations is? Anyone's got any good adjectives or other words that they can share about their organization? So Neil France, it's when you recognize the company, see the values reflected in the companies. Nice, I think that's an answer to the last question. Pop some ideas in there. What are your organization's identities? Passionate about employees being engaged. Okay, nice. That sounds very clear what the organization stands for. People feeling valued. Again, it sounds very clear about an organization's identity. Julia Charles, we build trust. Okay. So that's identity. And again, if more people put them in, we'll refer to them as we go through. Let's have a look now at culture. And culture is all about getting people to think about how they fit into the organization and the sort of the sum of its parts. So it's the sum of an organization's parts. It's shared values, shared behaviors, shared attitudes, shared expectations. And the organization's culture governs employees' experience of working for that organization. It's the culture in an organization around me which affects how I feel when I walk into the office on a Monday morning, or when I'm on a Teams call if I'm a remote worker. How do I feel being part of that organization? And it characterizes an organization and distinguishes it from others. So that's how we define organizational identity and organizational culture. But there's two important points to make here. Your identity is within your circle of control. Perhaps not yours necessarily, depending on your role within the organization, but there is someone in the organization who can define very clearly that identity and say, this is who we are, this is what we stand for, and so on. It's something which is set by senior management within an organization. Organizational culture, though, isn't so much, let's say it's within your circle of influence. The problem is that although you can identify and define your organization's identity, the culture is driven by your employees. You can influence that culture by creating the conditions where employees will live out the identity of the organization. But if you don't take steps to drive your culture, then there's no telling where it will go. Let's take a look at two real-life examples where misaligned identities and cultures cause problems. One from each perspective of identity and of culture. So, oh, my slide has not come up. Let me try that one more time. There you go. So let's talk politics, because there's always something good going on in politics, isn't there? But let's not talk too much about it. But, you know, a few years ago in the UK, we have had a referendum about whether we were going to stay as part of the EU or not. And we all know what happened in that referendum. Now, before the referendum, the UK was unquestionably part of the EU. Our identity was as a leading EU member state. But what about the country's culture? Did the public feel like part of the EU? Was the public aligned to the UK's identity? No, it wasn't. And what happened? We had a referendum and we left the EU. As a result of a national culture, which was stronger than the national identity, the UK's position in the world changed. Now, if we put this into organizational terms, we can say that the identity of an organization can be changed by the culture of its employees. And this can really happen. Think about Glassdoor. We all know Glassdoor, right? If you don't, it's a website where people can go and review either their current company or perhaps their former company that they used to work for. And those reviews are then visible to the public. So let's have a think then about an anonymous but true case study. This is an organization, a fairly large, fairly well-known organization. And I had a look at their website the other day on their sort of About Us page, and they had lots of words on there about their organizational identity. They said they are true to all stakeholders. They are plain speaking and approachable. They have human values. They balance talking and listening. Really clear about aspects of their identity. So I have another question for you then. Again, pop some things in the chat to me. When you read this about the organization's identity, what conclusions can you draw about what their culture might be? Just seen a post, I think, from the last question from Neil. Thinking of my client, they broadcast a lot on Facebook about the charity work they do in different branches, which makes employees feel good. Actually does some good outside the organization as well. So again, thoughts in the chat. What clues are there about their culture? So we've got no fear to share thoughts or to challenge other people. I would say, from my point of view, it's a sort of culture where they value individuals and people have input into things. Julia, they're honest. Stuart, they're progressive. Good. If we read this about their identity, we can draw conclusions, can't we, about their organizational culture? People-centric, open, no blame, all nice thoughts coming through on the chat. Transparency. Good. If you look at Glassdoor, however, and the reviews of real employees, you get a very different picture. Glassdoor tells us that there is a senior leadership carousel, a clueless marketing strategy, top staff leaving due to toxic politics, and employees unable to differentiate the organization. And that adds up to a very disappointing score of 2.8 out of 5 as a place to work. And you might be thinking, that's fine because we've got the identity on the website and the culture, that's just in the organization, isn't it? But it's not really, because cultures aren't kept secret, because people talk, people have friends and they talk to them in the pub, they post things on LinkedIn, they review their employers on Glassdoor. And if I'm a potential employee going to work at this organization and I've had the marketing pitch from them about being true to all stakeholders, balancing, talking and listening and so on, and then I check out Glassdoor, I'm going to think twice about even going to work there. In fact, I can say that as a fact. I've in the past gone for job interviews, a little while ago now, gone for job interviews, and I've been sold on the interview and on the idea, and then I've gone and checked out Glassdoor and I've seen things like this on there. And that has affected my decision. So, you know, cultures aren't secret. Employees, they know about it anyway, they're part of it. Future employees, customers, whoever. The thing is, we need to make sure that these things are aligned. And you probably know the phrase that, was it culture eats strategy for breakfast? That's something which we need to be aware of. Let me give you a story as well. Although culture can eat strategy for breakfast, identity can also hijack culture. So I used to work for an organization for many, many years. We were a smallish company, 300, 400 people, but we were part of a big multinational. And that multinational owned us for about 8 years, something like that. During the time I worked for them, we got fabulous messages coming down. The organization, they were very involved in academic publishing and research and so on. And the message coming down to where I worked was, as we do a good job, and I was in the project management division, as we do a good job, we are adding to like a body of knowledge in the world. We are equipping people around the world to respond to challenges, to increase their knowledge, to improve the way people do things. It was a real positive, outward-facing message that we were getting. Our organization does good, and the harder you work, the more successful you are, the more good we can do. And that was all very well. We had pretty grotty offices in central London. We had old laptops that perhaps didn't do what they should have done. Very little investment often, but people were motivated by this identity of the organization. And then in 2013, something changed. The parent company decided to offload a number of parts of their business and focus on their core subjects. And the company I worked for was sold to a team of American venture capitalists. And as this happened, the messaging coming down from above was amazing. We're going to invest in you. We're going to grow your business in 3 years. We moved from grotty central London offices to very, very nice central London offices in a slightly better part of central London. We all got new computers, our databases were upgraded, all the things which we felt were just sort of the way things are and nothing we could change. They were all addressed. We were going to get training, we were going to get new staff, new product lines. You could not fault the messaging that came from above as this sale purchase happened. But during that time, what I saw as a manager in the organization was people's motivation dropping and dropping and dropping. All the positive messages about how life is going to be so much better weren't having the impact. And after motivation dropped, people began to leave. And speaking to HR about what came up in the exit interviews, they were saying to me that again and again, what was coming up in the exit interviews was, I don't feel motivated because we used to be adding to this body of knowledge in the world. We used to be contributing to research and so on. And now all our efforts are lining the pockets of venture capitalists on the other side of the world. The identity, that change of identity from one organization to another, impacted the culture and people left. So that's why they need to be aligned. Identity can impact culture, culture can impact identity. And if they're not aligned, then these things go out of our control and cause us problems with motivation, with staffing, with communication, and so on. So organizational culture is governed by the core values of its employees. And I'm going to share with you now 4 types of culture. They're all okay. There's a place for all of them. 4 types of culture that you might see around you in 2023. Some of them sound a little more attractive than others, but bear with me on this one because they're all valid. And as I'm going through this, I'd like you to be thinking about the culture where you are. And I'd like you to tell me which, if any, you think it fits under. So the first culture I have for you is a caring culture. And a caring culture, it's the sort of organization where people feel like a family together. You can see the organization really cares about its employees. You perhaps see lots of signs of people receiving training and development and job progression. I had a call just this morning with one of my clients who was talking about how much he wanted to move some of his mid-level people into more senior positions because he felt they deserved it. You know, it's that sort of culture where we really care about people and the relationships between people. The individuals in that sort of organization care about themselves and each other's as well because they recognize they're spending so much time of their week in with these colleagues that they need to make it work. There's no point spending 40 hours a week with colleagues if you don't like them. My next type is what I call a collaborative culture. And a collaborative culture is where we recognize that we are all individuals, but we function much better if we function as a team. I know that I've got my skill set, but I also know where my limitations are. And I know that above that point, I should perhaps involve someone else and ask for help and brainstorm and teamwork together to achieve great things. The sum of the parts is less than, sorry, no, the sum of the parts is more than, you know what I mean. That everyone working together is a good thing. My third type, and this one perhaps doesn't sound so good, but it has a place. It's what we call a controlling culture. And a controlling culture is all about compliance, complying with the requirements handed down from the person above you in the hierarchy. And the role of the individual is to comply with those requirements from the supervisor. The senior leadership team, or sometimes just the CEO, has a vision, and he or she communicates that vision down, then everyone else in the organization is responsible for delivering on that vision. It creates a very strong focus on what the organization is trying to achieve, and it helps people really to know where they are within that and what they need to do to achieve it. My fourth type is what I call a corporate culture. And a corporate culture, that's all about being an organization where you kind of know and respect the idea that you work for a large corporate. You perhaps like the fact that even when everyone else dresses down, your company, you still come to work in a suit. You've probably got very nice offices somewhere. You present a very polished view to the outside world. Perhaps seems a little bit old-fashioned sometimes, but they often fits into very big organizations, and it works. So those are 4 types of culture. There's no right or wrong, and to an extent, people will be attracted towards the culture that matches themselves. So if you've got somebody who fits really well into a caring culture, they're probably not very likely to be attracted to go and work in a controlling type culture. But there are people who fit into all of them. So pop some thoughts in the chat to me. Where do you think your organizations fit on these four? Do you feel you work for an organization which has a culture of caring, of collaborative, of controlling, or of corporate? Let's have a look at the chat. So I've got collaborative. Give you a few more seconds if you can identify which of those you fit into. I can say for me in the past, when I used to work for the project management consultancy, which I mentioned just now, definitely a caring type of culture. Everyone was concerned about each other and helping people to progress. What have we got? Julia, from my own experience, I would go with caring and controlling. Collaborative, unless the pressure is on, then it becomes more controlling. I think that happens everywhere, doesn't it, Neil? So what we need to think about is that without trying to change the culture, because remember that the culture and the identity, hopefully they're aligned. I don't want to be making big changes to the culture because that can have an impact on the other side. I need to think about, without trying to change the culture, what can I do to positively promote my type of culture and to make it work? So if you've got a caring culture, how am I going to promote that? Well, I'm going to promote that to people by talking about opportunity, by talking about support. I might adopt maybe coaching as a key way of developing staff rather than formal training courses. If I've got a collaborative culture, I will be highlighting and recognizing different people's individual pieces that fit into that jigsaw that we work. I'll highlight people's skills, how each other complements other people. I'll share things like shared results, results of good collaboration and teamwork, which have brought the right things through for customers or the organization, and so on. If I've got a controlling culture, I might promote that by focusing on the depth of expertise that we have high up the organization, and the idea that if you follow those tasks which are handed down to you, it allows you to absorb that expertise and to upskill yourself in a very controlled way as you progress through the organization so that you can reach those top levels as well. If it's a corporate culture, I might be talking a lot about the impact that we have on the world. I might be talking a lot about how we're seen by other people in the marketplace. I might be talking a lot about perception and the fact that we want to give a very polished professional view. You know, some people thrive on that professionalism that you get in a corporate culture. I need to be communicating these things because that shows people why the culture is what it is and how that benefits them and the organization. It engages people in the organization. So let's think then about identity and culture alignment. Why do we need to align identity and culture? Well, we've already looked that one thing can impact another in both directions. What we need to do is define the organization's identity. If I'm going to align them and maximize the culture within the identity, people need to know what that identity is, and it needs to be clearly defined. Because sometimes organizations don't really know what they stand for. I was working with a pharma company about 6 months ago, and I asked them, I said, so what does your organization stand for? And these were mid to senior level managers. They didn't know. They said they come to work every day, they do the job, and they go home. And I could almost sense the demotivational feelings coming through the screen to me on a Zoom call. Define the organization's identity, be really clear about what it is. That is more important than trying to control the culture, because organizations are hopefully less transient than the employees. Employees will come and go, but they need to know while they're there, this is what the organization stands for. That's what motivates people and drives the right behaviors. I need to align my internal messaging. You should be making sure that the messages that come down from above are aligned to that identity, that the OKRs, the KPIs, those are all aligned to what the company stands for, and perhaps the standards that we expect of our employees about how people work together, how people dress, how people solve problems, resolve conflict, and so on. All those standards should be aligned to that organizational identity. There should be no conflict between the identity and what's coming below. And we need to engage employees long-term by giving them what they want and need. Why? Because the more staff turnover there is in your organization, the more fluid your organization becomes, and then more fluid the culture becomes. And as we know, if the culture changes, that can impact the organization's identity as well. You want a stable workforce where the culture naturally aligns itself to the identity rather than hijacking it as staff changes occur. Which brings the question then, how do I engage my staff? What do my staff want and need? What can I put in place to slow down staff turnover and get those staff to really respond to the identity my organization has? Well, I've got 9 areas which all organizations should be giving their staff in order to drive that culture within the identity. The first one, appreciation. People need to know that the work they've done is valued by somebody else. It's sort of the gratitude for the effort people have put in. People need to have a sense of purpose. They need to be able to join the dots between that boring spreadsheet data entry they're doing and the higher purpose, the identity for which the organization stands. Make that link between everyone's jobs and what comes above to show them how they contribute to something bigger than what they're doing. People should be challenged, not huge big challenges, but sort of a logical next step above what they're doing at the moment so that they can feel that they're progressing just by doing their job. Maybe you stretch them a little bit, they go and upskill either formally or informally in order to meet those challenges. And as organizations, you upskill the workforce. As an individual working for that organization, I feel that I'm growing. I feel that when I do leave the organization, I'm not going to leave as the same person I was when I came in. Another important one, mastery, the ability to develop, let's say, exceptional and possibly unique skills within the organization. The ability to become an expert at something and for other people to see and recognize that expertise that you have. People want to be the subject matter expert on something or other. I was a sales manager for an organization for many years. I was also the person people went to when they had a spreadsheet problem. I'd done a couple of courses. The secret geek inside of me quite enjoyed helping people to fix their spreadsheet problems. It was very informal. It wasn't aligned to my job at all, but it's something which is a little bit motivational to people. Especially at the moment, people need security. Yeah, there's lots of talk in various sectors at the moment about insecurity in the job market, isn't there? But people need to know that their job will still be there tomorrow. And if it is a little bit uncertain, they need to know that the organization and their managers are doing what they can to make sure their job is still there tomorrow. I was speaking to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and he works for an organization, he's a middle manager, and the organization is just creating a new role above him in his part of the business. It's being done for all the right reasons, growth in the organization, it's their sales strategy and so on. But he said to me when I saw him a couple of weeks ago, he said, Neil, I'm concerned because they're creating this role above me, and I don't know if I'll still have a job when that person comes in. Personally, I'm sure he's wrong. You create roles above you to create perhaps more structure and more direction, but that sort of thing can make people feel destabilized sometimes. And if you're going to do something like that, communicate down, give people that security that things aren't going to change in a bad way. Number 6, recognition. And this is a little bit different from appreciation. Appreciation is the gratitude for the efforts you put in. Recognition is recognizing the great job that somebody has done. And perhaps that recognition is public or semi-public. It might be putting something on the intranet. It could be giving them some sort of reward, but it's holding this person up and saying that this person has done a great job. The next one is very much aligned to that kind of caring culture that we talked about just now, but it recognizes that I spend 40 hours a week with my colleagues, which is more waking hours than I spend with anyone else in my life. And I want some harmony in the workplace. If I'm spending all this time with people, I don't want conflict and so on around. I want to know that I can have good, trusted relationships with my colleagues, and that although sometimes the pressure might come on, we're still nice to each other. Slightly on the flip side of that, but very appropriate in the right level, in the right sort of team. Many people want a bit of competition And my background as a sales trainer and a sales manager, that's absolutely something which works well in sales teams, but it can work well in other places as well. It doesn't have to be cutthroat competition, just small things that help you think that you're achieving something or having a little win against maybe something else in a very informal setting. And my ninth one, people want to have influence. People want to know that if they spot something that could be done differently, that they have the ability to influence the organization. It's about an organization asking for people's ideas and then considering those ideas carefully and in depth. And if the ideas get taken forwards, then we deserve some recognition. One of the others on there perhaps recognize a little bit of mastery, attach it to the purpose and the challenge. But even if those ideas aren't taken forwards, people need to know that the ideas have been properly considered and they need to understand why they haven't been taken forwards. So influence, the ability to influence others to improve the organization. So those are my 9 things that staff want and need, and these will be sent through to you afterwards on a one-pager to give you those definitions that I've just been going through. What I'd like to do now, as we begin to wrap up, is to look at some practical steps to success. What do you need to do to begin to do these things properly? So I've mentioned it already. Let's clarify our identity. We need to be really clear about what the organization identity is. Otherwise, there's no way I can begin to align the culture to it. We need to be able to equip managers to communicate the message. If we've got an identity up here and the managers have no idea how to disseminate that down clearly through the organization, then it's not going to have the impact we want it to, could even have a negative impact if they miscommunicate things. So we need to make sure those managers at the various levels are passing the right message down to the workers. Not that managers don't work as well, of course. Number 3. We need to meet employees' wants and needs, no matter what the culture type, whether you're a controlling culture, a collaborative culture, and so on. We need to make sure those employees' wants and needs are met, because those fit into any culture, but that's what engages the staff and motivate them. I need to show my appreciation, number 4, when people do things. Number 5, I need to ensure consistency across the organization by proactively breaking down silos. This can happen in small companies. It happens a lot in big companies that people just don't speak to each other enough, or they don't understand about each other enough to be able to collaborate, or maybe there's some history or some politics in the way. There's a lot of work that you can do to break down silos. And you can get external support. So you're on a webinar with me. My speciality is things like breaking down silos, leadership, communication, getting those messages right, and so on. You've got my details. You'll have them sent at the end. Reach out to me. I'm here to offer you help if you need to. From the other side, in terms of thinking about the way you can recognize people and drive the culture in that way, then Terryberry are there to help. So I'm going to hand over now to Kate to give you a little summary of what Terryberry can do to support you on this journey as well. Kate.
Thank you so much, Neil. Really enjoyed that. Thanks so much. So just at this point, as Neil said, I'd just like to take 1 minute to tell you a little bit about Terryberry and what we do. Our mission, our identity, is to inspire people to achieve remarkable things. We build customized solutions for our clients based around igniting employee engagement and success, and provide a one-stop shop for your employees to be recognised for their achievements and career milestones, as well as the ability to interact, share success stories, as well as access their benefits, employee benefits, really easily. From our most recent launch, we saw the active user rate at 88% with just under 5,000 employees, which is a result of a fantastic collaboration, which we are really proud of. We will be following up this session with a link to this recording and our details. So if you would like an informal discussion with one of our engagement specialists, then please let us know and we will see how we can help. So as Neil mentioned as well, we also have a guide summarising the practical steps shared today. So we can provide those in the follow-up email. If you would like any further information, then please get in touch and we will send this to you. So I'd like to open up the floor now, if I may, to any questions that you may have. Really pop in some questions into the chat and Neil, myself and Ian are available to answer. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Kate. So While you put some questions into the chat, there you go. Further help if you need it. There's Terryberry's website. There's my website. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. There's two Neil Shawneys. One of us was really influential working for the WHO in overcoming COVID problems in the world. I'm the other one, but do find me. So what have we got? Questions? Give us some questions or some thoughts about actions or next steps you need to take in order to embrace culture and identity where you work. Or no questions is fine as well. I guess that means we've covered everything.
Yeah, sounds good. One question that I often get asked is the problem being quite big, or the challenge being quite big. So, you know, lots of HR people say, we're trying, we know we need to look at this, but it is like that starting point. Where do you start? And obviously you've talked a little bit about that today, those starting points. Yeah,
we need to think about the oh, sorry, just seeing that thing come through from Neil in the chat. Sent the link to them. Lovely. Thank you, Neil. We need to think about the scale of the problem. And in a smaller organization or a younger, agile organization, this problem doesn't have to be enormous. It's something, if we get it right in the early days, it's helpful. In the bigger organizations, it's like trying to turn a ship in the sea. It doesn't happen very easily. But I'll refer you back to that slide we had a couple of minutes ago. And again, that will be sent through to you afterwards on a one-pager. The first thing you need to do is understand who you are as an organization. Different people might have different ideas about what that is. You need to collaborate within the senior leadership team and perhaps push it down a little bit further in the organization as well to really become clear about what you stand for. If those different parts of identity that we looked at earlier, the most important one is why are we here? Because that's what then engages people. If you can do that first, then I would say marketing is a good way to go. Internal marketing, speak to marketing people, think about how we can not just stick something on the intranet because we know that no one will ever look at that, but how you can actually get the right messages going through the organization. You can run internal workshops. I ran many years ago a whole program of internal workshops for clients, which was just about trying to get that identity clear, get people's input into it, and then think about how they live out that identity in the role. So it's not the sort of thing that's going to be quick. I would say with that client, it took us about 2.5 years to get from a really messy place through to where it was beginning to get aligned. But it's not a quick one, but if we can get it right, if we can take those small steps, think about it strategically, then you can get there. Question there from Stuart: how do you deal with the them and us scenario, especially in an acquisition type environment? Well, that was where I was. Because we were very much them and us, and what happened was us left and them took over because we didn't get, or because they didn't, the venture capitalists didn't get any sort of alignment between the old identity and the new identity. It will always happen that things are going to be a little bit different. If an organization gets bought or sold, things will change, but it's about managing those expectations before the change comes along. We were thinking at the time, why have they sold us? I thought, oh, they liked us. But there's always business reasons for making these things, and communicating really early on what's happening, why it's happening, what it means for people, and trying to find some consistency between the before and after, some things which don't change, that show people that it's not a complete switch. That's helpful. We didn't have that when it happened to me. They even changed the name of the company. They dropped a 30-year-old brand name and put it with something else. People, in terms of employees in the organization, in the UK office, the senior leaders left, the office changed, the name of the company changed, their email addresses changed, the product set all got rebranded. There was nothing in common. That was like a big culture shock because of the change in identity. But if you can find the things which aren't changing and highlight those to people, then that really helps to show them that yes, there's a shift, but we're not completely dropping what there was before. Did I see another question above?
Yeah,
yes, getting staff
buy-in.
Yeah, getting staff buy-in is important, because without that, the culture won't work. Yeah, I would say that's true, Julia. You want staff to buy into the identity. It's important to remember that the culture will be there, whatever. but it will be either a really nice culture or a really messy culture. So that the culture is the sum of the staff. So it's partly about staff buy-in, but it's also about making sure that staff agree with each other. And to an extent, it's under my influence, it's not under my control. It will be driven by who works for the organization and what their values, their feelings are, and so on. What's most important, rather than getting them necessarily to buy into the culture I want to put in place, is to getting them to buy into each other, so that you haven't got, and this is where we then get siloed workings, when one part of the organization wants to work in one way, there's a different culture in finance, there's a different culture in sales, there's a different culture in operations, and so on. That's where we get more problems. So trying to get consistency, and yeah, having workshops across departments. Something that worked very well in the organization I used to work for, we used to have monthly meetings between teams, and there would be 1 or 2 representatives from each team sent to that meeting each month. No managers were allowed to be there, but it got people to talk on a much more open level with each other and begin to break down some of those silos lower down the organization. So you haven't got managers going, you will start talking to each other. You've got people actually talking to each other and discussing things without the pressure from management there. So anything you can do to align people is really helpful. Now, someone who's looking at the chat better than me, have I missed one? I don't think so.
No, I think that was all of the questions there. So thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate your time. As I said, everybody that registered will receive a link to the recording. It will also be on our website, and everyone who registered, we do have the guide that we'll be sending through. If any of your team would like that, just reach out, and we are here to have a chat. And we want to understand what your world looks like and how we can support you and how we can help drive your culture aligned to your company identity. Thanks, everybody.
Lovely. Thank you, Kate. Bye, everybody.
Bye.